Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and I'm excited to be here. This is our first Thursday night show of the season, and with us we have a couple new faces, and we have Evan Ostro, and we have Vince Welts, and so hello, fellas.
How you doing?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Hey, just as we get rolling, I want to warn you guys, we all have some nicknames here, and how about until we develop the nicknames for you guys, we'll just call you Thing 1 and Thing 2. Welcome to the Kick-Ass team. We're pretty excited to have you guys. We've been doing this. I've been doing it with Judge Ray Jaffe. We did last year together. Our show is on Tuesday nights at 9. We got JB and Don are on Wednesday nights at 9, and so we got a couple new faces, and we're happy to have you guys. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on your fantasy experience? Evan, why don't you go first?
I've been playing for 4 years. It's gotten more intense, more competitive each year, and a lot of leagues, friends with home, and then in college. Pretty dedicated, except on the ESPN leagues. Last year started setting my alarm to 5 a.m. for waivers, so just a real enjoyment. Love getting into the nitty-gritty of fantasy.
That's great. Lots of nitty-gritty to get into. So, Vince, why don't you go ahead?
I've been playing fantasy for, I couldn't even, a long time, 6-7 years. I started playing in 7th, 8th grade in a league with all my dad and his friends, and I was 12 years old, and I remember just beating up on all those guys and, loving it, always watching SportsCenter to see how my guys did, watching every game. I love football. I love fantasy football, and I'm excited to be a part of the team.
Well, fabulous. So do you have a superiority complex? Have you beaten up on every team you've been on? Is that right?
Not every team, but I usually do pretty well.
All right, that's good enough. Yeah, as we all know, fantasy has our ups and downs. You're 6 or 7 years dwarfs in experience, and on several of our talent, we have, some of us have over 20 years experience in doing fantasy football. So but it's great to jump in, have some different perspectives, and let's get ready for our show. So just to start off, big Eagles fan base, at least from the Kick-Ass fantasy team. So let's start off on that. A lot of buzz about Michael Vick and this being his first year coming out. Having the full off season with the Eagles, having the whole the training room and the facility available to him. And so I'm kind of wondering, for my own purposes, especially with the increase in the valuation of the quarterbacks, what you guys think of the season Michael Vick will have this year. So let's start off with that.
I guess I'll go first. Is that cool, Evan?
Yeah, you go.
I love it. I think Vic is going to have an awesome year. But then again, I'm a little bit of a homer. Last year was a rough year for Vic with the lockout and the dubbing of the Dream Team and all that distraction. But I think this year with a full off season, time to develop. Deshaun Jackson is in his right state of mind. He got his contract. He got his pay. You don't have that to worry about. You got a healthy Brent Selleck, with Sean McCoy coming off the best year of his career, a great line, a line that's going to give him a lot of time, I think, a year. They weren't great last year, but they had a year to bond, and I think they'll be even better. He's got so many weapons. I think Vic is going to do really big things, and, I wouldn't be surprised to see him taking the NFC East Championship and maybe even a Super Bowl.
You gotta love Vic and the Eagles' offense, but the only thing, especially with the loss of Jason Peters, in 9 years, Vic has only played 16 games once. The loss of Peters, he plays in the NFC East. There's great pass rushers on every team. The athletes are there, no doubt. They want to make it a track meet. They can beat anyone in that. It's just, can Vic stay healthy, and that's really everything with the Eagles.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair question. Absolutely, but I gotta believe that after all these years, he's finally gonna learn how to slide, because that was something Vic never did, and I feel like that's got to be, every coach has to be in his ear. Vic, Michael, get down, just don't take the hit. You know, he's the type of guy that I love it from, you know, a fan standpoint. His attitude is, I'm going to get that extra yard. But if the Eagles want to really win this year and want to do some damage, he's going to have to learn how to take his slides where he can get them.
100%. It's just like Vic even said last year. I mean, he never gets a rough in the passer call. So coach has been in his ear about the sliding since college probably, though. But, you know, like you said, his attitude, and he's just such an unbelievable athlete. You can never take the athlete out of the kid, and you just got to hope he can stay healthy, because he is electrifying to watch.
Absolutely.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, last night he was on Jaworski's show. He does like a film room show on ESPN.
Yeah.
And his attitude, I just love it. I mean, he thinks he's the vet. He's so confident. He has so much confidence in his arm and his legs. He has so much confidence in his teammates, so much confidence in his coach, Andy Reid. I love his attitude. I think he's really in the right state of mind. You can tell just by the way he talks that he's working hard in camp. And I'm really excited.
Well, he's been ordered by President Obama to learn how to slide. So, assuming he listens to Obama and he does learn how to slide, he avoids some contact. He's been going as a top 10 quarterback, but are you taking top 5 if he can put that all together and stay healthy?
The only thing with Vic is if you spend a top 5 pick on him, you're also going to have to probably spend another, not high, but early, you probably don't want to draft 2 quarterbacks, but if you draft Vic, you got to have a safe, backup plan. That's one of his major hits on drafting him in the top 5.
I wouldn't draft Vic in the top 5 just because of how injury prone he is. If he's around after Brady, Rodgers, Breeze, Phillip Rivers, Eli, if he's like the 6th or 7th quarterback to come off the board, I think that's right where you should take him. 6th or 7th QB fantasy wise. That's where I would put him.
And that's probably about right, or a little bit higher than a lot of the projections. So it's not showing too much of the homerism.
Who would you rather have, Phillip Rivers or Michael Vick?
There you go. So just to remind everyone, we do have a couple chatters that are coming into the chat room, so feel free to provide us any questions you have. We'll get them on the air. We also do have our call-in number, which is 877-511-1024. If you'd like to call in and ask a question, we'll get you on the air. So let's move on a little bit. We talked about Michael Vick, the other big name from the offensive standpoint for the Eagles. There's several, but we'll go with LeSean McCoy. And if Vick has a big year, you guys mentioned the big year McCoy had last year. Can they coexist, both having spectacular years? I mean, McCoy had an outstanding year last year. But what do you think's in store for him this year?
Their goal line, when they get to the goal, I live with a lot of Philly fans at Penn State, but he had Vick and McCoy on both his team, and he's like, it's illegal. If anytime they're in the red zone, there are only 2 red zone options because all their receivers are so small, So, and they run that beautiful stretch play where last second Vick can keep it, or just inside draw to McCoy.
Yeah.
I mean, McCoy in the goal, the only thing you're afraid with McCoy is those great screen plays that he's just unbelievable on open field, and Peters is leading the way for him out there. But I mean, McCoy is as safe as it gets.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think not only can they coexist, they have to for each other to succeed.
Yeah.
I mean, for Vic to have as great of a year as I think he potentially can have, McCoy has to have just as great of a year because, if with that threat where if you have that home run threat in your backfield, that's making the safeties creep in a little bit, giving Vic the option of the deep ball, making that throw just a little bit easier. And with Vic being able to throw the ball, that makes the safeties creep back, giving a bigger holes for McCoy. So, I think they both help each other out when they play well.
Especially because McCoy keeps Vic from getting hit on the ground too much. If they can establish the run, it really keeps Vic upright.
Well, however it works out, I know we're expecting a big year from the Eagles. Again, we're a lot of big Eagles fan base from the Kick-Ass Fantasy team. We're very objective in our analysis, but let's face it, fantasy football, sometimes you let the homerism keep in. So
Eagle fans are dying for it.
Yeah, the Eagle fans love it. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit more fantasy football. So all you listeners, please hold on, and if you have a question, feel free to dial in at 877-511-1024 or get in our chat room.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com. Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all day long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Well, welcome back, fans. This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Jumpin' John Prebo, and with me is our new talent fantasy experts, Evan Ostro and Vince Welts, or as I like to affectionately call them, Thing 1 and Thing 2. So, guys, you're going to have to come up with something, or we're going to have to come up with something, or else you're going to be labeled. So let's get working on that. So we talked a little bit about the Eagles. We'll talk a lot bit about the Eagles in the first segment of our show. So we're going to come back a little bit and talk about a rival, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. And specifically, we're going to talk about Dez Bryant, who had some off-field activities, and what that means for his on-field activities. So, Vince, why don't you lead us off and tell us what you think about Dez Bryant, or keep it clean, though, right?
Well, yeah, for those of you that don't know, Dez Bryant was involved in an off-the-field altercation with his mother where he allegedly hit her. It just happened a week or so ago, so the charges are pending. But Dez has always been a guy that it's been a question about his character ever since Oklahoma State, and I think that makes him a risk for the fantasy world because he's kind of like Pac-Man Jones. I mean, Pac-Man Jones was an offensive player, but always risking suspension somewhere, doing something off the field. And I think it's something to worry about because Dez Bryant has so much talent and so much promise that it really is a shame. I mean, not a shame for our Eagles fans because it's pretty good for us, but I just think this is just one more thing that could make you say, when you're looking at your draft board, make you say, maybe I'll stay away from Dez Bryant.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Dez Bryant, everyone's obviously been waiting for the breakout year to come. Everyone knows about the trouble in the mall and with his mom. But, I mean, in the Dallas offense, what has always done well, that third wide receiver that Romo just loves feeding, Laurent Robinson, prime example at you. Well, now that's gone, and now it's up to Dez. It's either Dez or bust with his team. Because, I mean, behind him they only got Kevin Ogletree and Jesse Holley, you got on the team from a TV show. I mean, it's literally do or die for Dez Bryant this year. And you know what? I think his ability, you have to trust it. He still almost had 1,000 yards last year and 9 touchdowns in what many considered a down year. So I think that Cowboy offense is too good you have to take a risk on him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not questioning his ability whatsoever. He's a freak of nature. Coming out of college, he was probably one of the best wide receivers in the past 10 years. To rank him top 5, maybe even athletic talent-wise. But off the field issues, him and Romo have had their beef in the past. Miles Austin is a much better pick. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely a good wide receiver. I'm thinking 4th or 5th round.
Yeah. That's a little low. I mean, yeah.
Third, I think third would be a little bit of a stretch.
You gotta hope he's there the fourth. You know, like, I mean, the only thing with Miles is, I mean, the hamstring and the injuries just keep adding up and adding up.
Yeah, I mean,
it really makes that loss to Lauren Robinson seem a little bit more important now, because Lauren Robinson had proved himself. From a fantasy perspective, you hope that your players can play all year. We think about any looming suspensions. I mean, have you guys heard any news that coming out that there may be a suspension that's going to take effect, or do you think, especially if no charges are filed, this will sort of blow over?
I haven't heard any news about suspensions, but just with the way Roger Goodell has handled his players in recent history since he's been put in that presidential position or in that commissioner position, he's so tough on players. I mean, I would be surprised if there wasn't some type of punishment, but
I don't think he gets suspended. I definitely don't think his mom's going to keep the charges. They'll get dropped. If anything, it would have to be a Cowboy thing, which I don't think they can afford to suspend, especially with the first game being against the Giants.
Yeah, there's no way the Cowboys would suspend him.
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying. There's no way. I don't think he gets suspended.
And what do you think, with all the uncertainty then, we talk about Miles Austin and his hammy problems, so what about Jason Witten? He's definitely been a top tight end, and you think that, he's actually going to bode a little bit better this year, or is he still, down a few pegs, just trying to feed the ball to Dez Bryant?
I think he goes back to his, almost 2-3 years ago, Jason Witten, where he was a prolific receiver. He's going to step back more into a blocking role. But all lines a little improved now over the years, and I think especially he'll be the main beneficiary, especially in the red zone with Laurent Robinson. I think Witten will come back into more of the – I mean, Witten and Romo have always had a great rapport, but he's kind of been asked to do a little more blocking as their O-line has been a little weak over the years. But I think it's finally a little more patched up, and I think you could see a spike in his numbers.
Yeah, I think Witten will have a very big year, and a lot of that will depend on how Romo plays in the red zone, because Witten's definitely their biggest red zone target.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he's not going to be the number one tight end, and that's only just because Rob Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham are two of the best tight ends we've really seen in the last decade. I mean, they're really changing the position. Gronkowski, they both had over 1,300 yards last year. Gronkowski had 17 touchdowns, and Graham had 11. So I don't think Witten will put up numbers like that, but he'll be a top 5 tight end, I believe.
That's pretty good projection. It's just Witten's a very steady guy, very steady hand. I like very very good fact pointing out with Lauren Robinson gone, he becomes more of the red zone target. Gets more of the red zone targets again. So look for a big year from Jason Witten. Information still to come on Dez Bryant and the Cowboys, who a couple weeks ago would have been a top postseason pick for me. Now maybe I have a little questions just because of what's going on with Dez Bryant. Let's turn it back a little bit more and talk about. We've talked about the Eagles. We've talked about the Cowboys. So naturally, we're going to go to the Steelers. So one thing that you two don't know is I'm also a big Steeler fan. I know JB's a big Steeler fan, and it's big rivalries with Cowboys throughout the year. So let's talk about the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger. News just came out not too long ago that he actually played with a torn rotor cuff. So what are you going to do with Ben Roethlisberger this year? What do you think, guys?
He's never been a premier, when you think of Ben Roethlisberger, think of more of as a winner than a fantasy player. I mean, the injuries, they add up, but he always finds some way to tough it out, but it doesn't always reflect well in his numbers. Especially, I think more important, though, is the Todd Haley getting brought in. Todd Haley, KC, they ran the ball to death with Charles and Thomas Jones. I think they'll definitely run the ball more. Isaac Redman could have a big year for them. Especially they added to Castro. I think they're going to try and run the ball more and try and somehow keep Roethlisberger upright because, he's heroic, but eventually it'll add up.
Yeah, I agree with Evan. Roethlisberger's not really your premier fantasy quarterback. He's definitely more of just like a very good decision maker that can get you wins. He always gets it done in the red zone. One of the things that I think will hurt his season is it's up in the air with Mike Wallace right now. I mean, he's holding out. The Steelers have said that they don't want to deal with this. They don't want these contract negotiations. If he's not going to show the camp, they're not going to worry about it. But how can you not worry about it? He's a prolific wide receiver. That's something that Steelers fans should definitely be worried about. I know that'll affect Roethlisberger's numbers greatly because Wallace, one of the things he does so well is stretch the field, give that run game more opportunities, get his tight end, get Roethlisberger good looks to his tight ends over the middle, which is something the Steelers focus on, So that could be a big issue.
Yeah, Antonio Brown last year just lived off Mike Wallace. I mean, that shows how it really has a great effect on the team.
But I think it's unfortunate that the situation is playing out like it is because, what a great pair of receivers they will have or would have, depending on what Wallace decides to do. I think it's a great point about Todd Haley because he can air it out. He's got a background in that in Arizona. I think he can design an offense to take advantage of two great receivers. And if Wallace is going to hold out in the season, that's going to obviously throw a crimp in that plan. So, tell you what, guys, we're going to do another commercial break, and we're going to come back. So, again, for the listeners out there, we have a call-in line, which is 877-511-1024, or feel free to launch your questions in the chat room, and we'll be back in just a minute. So, thank you for listening to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95, and we'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com. Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Welcome back, everyone. And obviously it was for me. This is your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and we're back with Evan Ostro and Vince Wells, and we're talking a little bit of fantasy football. Yeah, so some great additions to our kick-ass team, and let's get right back into it. We've had some good conversations on the Eagles, on Dez Bryant, and on Ben Roethlisberger. Let's go a little bit. Probably the biggest name that changed teams over the year is Peyton Manning. And Peyton Manning is now with the Denver Broncos, so hopefully you all know that. And one of the things that we're all anxious to see is if he's back at 100%, will he be the Peyton of old, and what any of this means. So, Vince, why don't you start us off, and let's talk a little Peyton Manning.
You gotta love Peyton Manning. One of the biggest class acts in the NFL. The way he left Indianapolis, did it with so much class, and I really think he's going to have a big year with the Broncos because how could he not? The neck is 100%, according to him, according to team doctors, and he's Peyton Manning. He's a guy that not only relies on his arm, he's a guy that not only relies on his arm, but he relies on his mind just as much as anything, more than any quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he knows systems. I'm sure he's picked up Denver Broncos. I'm sure he's picked up John Fox's offense like that. He doesn't have that many weapons though. Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker they had solid seasons last year, but I expect I expect Manning to make them better, and I think he'll have a good year. Denver had a great defense. I mean, they went 7-4 with Tim Tebow at the helm, so I'm sure Peyton will be able to do at least that good, if not a lot better. So I think we'll have a good season.
Yeah, and you got to remember that it's going to be a complete.
Billy's new cry.
It's going to be a completely different offense than they ran with Tebow. So it's obviously if there's one person you want running the helm, it's Peyton Manning. But Evan, why don't you give us a little bit of your thoughts on what Peyton Manning is going to bring to the table?
Yeah, a quarterback in the first year of an offense is always going to be a little bit of a, give and take. My only fear with Peyton is, no one truthfully knows how healthy that neck is. You got to see him get hit. And then another factor is his whole career he's played pretty much indoors. Now he's got to play a lot of games outdoors in some pretty bad weather. You got to see how that goes. But you got to love that you got to get a route runner on this wide receiver on the Broncos. So you think Decker or Stokely could be in a big year. They brought in Tammy and Joel Dreesen from Houston is another good tight end. So you got to kind of the under-the-radar receivers on this team.
Well, he definitely had a rapport with Tammy from prior years, but it does bring up the questions. You both mentioned maybe some upgrades that would be needed in the receiving core, but the fact is, at this point of the year, it may not be out there. I can't see Denver bringing in a CO at this point. So it's going to be a hot topic, and hot topic is who's going to be their number one? Who's the go-to guy? Who do you want on your fantasy team from Denver as a receiver? Is it going to be Demaryius Thomas or is it going to be Eric Decker? So, Evan, why don't you lead us off? Who's your guy?
I was actually doing a mock draft yesterday and staring at Eric Decker, and I'm like, wow, am I really drafting Eric Decker this early? But I think it's Eric Decker. Peyton loves a route runner. Peyton can make any receiver look good. He doesn't need to be big, fast. He's got to run routes. He's got to trust in him. He'll develop an Austin Collie-like rapport with him.
Yeah.
He's big, strong, fast. Decker can get it done. He's 6'3". A lot of people forget that he's only 25. I definitely see him clicking with him early on.
I think it's a toss-up between either of them. I want to see him play 3 games. Obviously, that's not possible before your fantasy draft, but I wouldn't say which one's going to be the go-to guy before I see a couple games, because they're both, last year they were both 500 to 750-yard receivers, just decent seasons, but they didn't really have much of a chance. This year with Peyton Manning, like Evan said, he'll develop an Austin Collie rapport with one of them, like he did that one year with Austin Collie and Pierre Garcon, 2 guys that before that year were unheard of. And I think one of them, whoever it is, I'm not sure who it is, but either Eric Decker or Demaryius Thomas is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver with 8 to 10 touchdowns this year, because Peyton Manning's throwing the ball. So it's a nice risk to take on one of them, whichever one you decide. It's not a bad pick in an early round.
Yeah, I think as has been proven, any receiver that's on the team could be a huge target and huge fantasy scorer that for a Peyton Manning-led team. I think I may actually. I've been doing some mock drafts as well, and we will get into mock drafts later in the show. I've been looking at Demaryius Thomas as more, I don't want to say the flyer, but when you're kind of deciding who to pick and you're not sure, and hey, well, let's get a Denver receiver. But the more I think about it, I think it's like you guys said, Eric Decker's more of a route runner. I think Demaryius Thomas is more of a speed guy. And with questions about Peyton Manning's arm strength and whether he can really fling it down the field, I might be inclined to look at Eric Decker a little bit over. So I think that's going to be an interesting battle. And I'm on record already with Judge Jaffe on our Tuesday night show saying that I don't think Peyton Manning's going to be a top 10 quarterback. He's going to start teams, but I'm not convinced he's back 100%. And there's a lot of young up and coming quarterbacks, so I think maybe they'll be able to take the helm. I think there's more of an injury risk. He hasn't gotten hit. I don't know how comfortable he's going to feel in the pocket. He doesn't have the line he got very comfortable with in Indianapolis, and so I'm making my bold predictions of the year, and that's my first one.
I like it.
How do you like them apples?
I mean, a guy like Andy Dalton compared to Peyton Manning. Who's really the safest pick?
Come on. Peyton Manning over Andy Dalton over Peyton Manning? No way.
You got a young, talented, up-and-coming quarterback, talented, up-and-coming receiver, with
great play caller.
A guru, an offensive coordinator. Guys, I mean, it's out there. It's out there.
I mean, I respect the prediction, but Peyton Manning's still Peyton Manning to me. He's had a long time off, long time to think about that injury. I see him coming out and having a pretty good year.
And even a fair year from Peyton Manning standards will probably be in Denver. But a lot of Peyton Manning lovers out there, right? So,
yeah, I'm one of them. I love Peyton Manning.
And so for all of our tens and tens of listeners out there, one of the pratfalls you may want to make sure you avoid is overreaching for your, those guys that you have a man crush for. For me, it's Randy Moss and Ryan Matthews. I've overdrafted them in many years, both of them more so for Randy Moss just because I wanted them on my team. So and just be careful. And that actually is an article that is on the kickassfantasyfootball.com website that you guys can read. We have lots of new content on there. We have a revamped website, so it's something I'm hoping you all visit. It's $9.95 for a subscription and the chance to win a cruise. So with that, we're going to be taking a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame game, and I hope you all stay with us. So feel free to give us a call at 877-511-1024.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and kickassfantasyfootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from fantasyjudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with kickassfantasyfootball.com. Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Okay, guys, we're back. This is your host, Jumpin' John Prevo, and this is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Fantasy Football Show. And we have our hosts, or our fantasy experts, Evan Ostro and Vince Welch with us. So welcome back, fellas. And one thing I wanted to mention is, listening to the commercials, we just got back off. One of the great new enhancements to our site is the Fantasy Judgment. And if you've ever, you guys have been playing for a couple years. I know for some of those veterans that are out there, every year there's always the questions that come up about either a trade or a maneuver that was made or commissioners' activities or lack of activities. And just so, the Fantasy Judgment, he will adjudicate your fantasy issue. I think there's one, if you sign up for the website, you get one free, I believe it is, and then it's a $15 for the year. And it's just a great way to get your issues solved for someone who has no personal interest in it but has years of experience in adjudication of these issues. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. So for all your listeners out there, it's a great enhancement to our site. Get back into it. Let's talk about the Hall of Fame game. First preseason football game of the season is coming up. It's August 5th at 8 p.m., and we have Arizona versus the Saints. So it's a great way to kick off the year. So let's get a little bit of thoughts from our experts. So Vince, why don't you lead us off? What are we going to, I know it's a preseason game. What do you think about the Hall of Fame game?
Well, it's an interesting game because on the one side with the Cardinals, You got a big quarterback battle. I mean, I know they announced Cobb was the starter, but there's still issues there. There's still things that can happen. And then on the other side, you got the Saints coming out for the first time since all that has happened with the bounty and all those penalties and everything, and Drew Brees with his comments to Roger Goodell. It'll be interesting to see how he plays with all that on his mind. So, I mean, for an early preseason game, there's some interesting topics to see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for a game this early, that's all you can really ask for. You got a good quarterback battle. You got some good rookies with Floyd from Notre Dame. And the Saints are always fun to watch. And like you say, you got to see the play calling and see how their offense looks different at all with their coaching changes. But that's all you can ask for a game this early.
Yeah, and speaking of Floyd, I'm very interested to see how he plays because earlier in the offseason, Larry Fitzgerald, one of the best wide receivers in the game, actually called out Michael Floyd for his work ethic, saying that he didn't think he was working hard and all that. And you would think a receiver to come in the first round with high expectations, playing across a guy like Larry Fitzgerald would be, working his hardest to live up to a guy like that. So I'm interested to see how he plays because he's a guy with a lot of talent. Had 3 great seasons at Notre Dame. A guy that could really make Kevin Cobb look good. So that's another thing that will be interesting to watch.
And that's one of the questions, though, isn't it? Is do they really have a quarterback that's going to be able to get him the ball? You mentioned Kevin Cobb. He's, I guess, penciled in as first string. Is he the quarterback, and can he do it? And if he's got Fitzgerald and an up-and-coming rookie receiver, what do you think the year has in store for Kevin Cobb?
See, I'm not 100% sure. Kevin Cobb, what did he play, 7 games last year before he got hurt? So that was his first season as a starter. He didn't play good, but I wouldn't say he played terribly. In 5 seasons for Kevin Cobb, we really haven't seen much. We really haven't seen what he can do. This is really, to me, the season where he decides if he's going to be a starting quarterback or a journeyman, a la like a Tim Hasselbeck of the past or like a Trent Dilfer, although Trent Dilfer has a Super Bowl ring, but, one of those types of quarterbacks, or if he can establish himself as a solid NFL starter. This is the season where he decides it, especially with the talent that the Arizona Cardinals organization has surrounded him with.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with both of those quarterbacks is their O-line last year was horrible. They both got beat up. And Cobb's kind of a small guy, and Skelton's a little bigger. And it's basically going to come down to who can work best with Larry Fitzgerald, I think. Who can stand in the pocket and deliver him a strike. And, I mean, I'm rooting for the Fordham guy just being a New York guy, but it's all about that O-line. Can they protect either one of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously you have to stay upright in order to be productive. I guess you'd like to see a big year if you're any sort of Eagles fan from Kevin Cobb, just because he was with the Eagles for all those years. You did mention in his 5 years, he spent 3 as a backup in Philly, had some time due to injuries to shine, had injuries to himself last year. So in a way, he really hasn't gotten that opportunity. So it'll definitely be interesting. And Larry Fitzgerald is in many drafts he's going as probably the number 2 receiver. But in order for that to work, he needs someone to throw in the ball. So it'll be quite interesting.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Yeah, well, you can find it disturbing, but he hasn't proven himself. So I guess that's what faith is, right? Yeah, that's what faith is.
Faith about 1,400 yards last year, 8 touchdowns, though. So that gives you a little hope.
A little bit of hope. So there you go. What about Drew Brees? So we're flipping to the other side, and I know it's a preseason game. Talk about distractions. Suspensions. They have an assistant head coach, right? Or interim head coach.
Yeah.
Well, Drew Brees, fantastic, phenomenal year last year. Is he going to repeat? So, Evan, what do you think? Is Drew Brees going to repeat this year? His numbers.
I don't think you can repeat that. But when they're in New Orleans, no one can stop that offense, and he's almost a lock for at least 350 yards at home. And I think with all these coaching changes early on, Drew Brees is going to become somewhat of a Peyton Manning, just basically running the show at the line of scrimmage. I mean, they lost Meacham, but they drafted Nick Toon out of New Orleans, and this offense is still as good as it gets. He's not going to put up as many touchdowns, but he'll still be at least a top 3-5 quarterback.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no way you can expect him to have the year that he had last year just because it was such a record-breaking year, breaking Marino's record and everything. But there's no question this guy, year in and year out, is a top 5 quarterback, and he does it at 6 feet, which makes it even more impressive. And I actually like the way he handled the whole Goodell situation. He didn't lie. He was honest to reporters. He spoke his mind. And Drew Brees has always been a stand-up guy, so he gives to charity. I have no problem. A lot of people had a problem with what he said, and I have no problem with that. I think it makes this Hall of Fame game, which I'm not gonna lie, I usually don't even watch preseason games. They're just a tease to me. It actually makes this Hall of Fame game interesting enough to watch.
Yeah, preseason, with the starters only playing in a quarter or sometimes even less, it does make it difficult. But I agree. I think with everything that's been going on, especially with the Saints, I think you want to tune in to see how they respond. And even if it's only preseason, I think you'll get a lot of insight on what kind of team the Saints are going to be down the road by how they come out on Saturday. So I think that's going to be interesting. One other topic, just talking about some of the team turmoil that I wanted to ask you guys about is the sale of the Browns. It looks like the Browns are going to be sold. Actually, it's a Pittsburgh owner that's going to be purchasing them, so that's going to be very interesting from Pittsburgh's point of view. We got a shark in the water. All right, so, Browns are sold. It's a very interesting development. What do you think it means for the Browns as a franchise, and do you think it's going to have any impact on the team and on any of the fantasy prospects this season? So, Vince, why don't you lead us off a little bit on the sale of the Browns and what your thoughts are?
I don't think it'll have an impact on the way the team plays this year. It's still the same players, same coach, all that. I do think it affects the future a lot, though, because the Browns organization has been pretty terrible for a pretty long time. And when you're that bad for that long, it has to come down to ownership and front office. So maybe this new owner, I don't know anything about him, maybe this new owner is going to clean house, put in a new GM, a whole new front office, new president, and maybe he'll get some capable guys in there to put together a franchise that's not, and I hate to say this, not a joke year in and year out. I mean, they had the 1 year with Derek Anderson where they went 10-6, but besides that, I can't think of a year where the Browns are anywhere close to decent. So for the Cleveland faithful, hopefully this means that the franchise will finally be on the up.
Yes, I mean, the last gut to the stomach of Browns fans was how bad they wanted RG3, and then they see the Redskins move up and give up a ton, and the Browns have given up a little less and probably got them. I mean, the Browns have had nothing to root for a long time. This year, you just hope it's they're going with a huge youth movement with Whedon and Trent, and you've still got Greg Little on the outside. But, I mean, in that division, they've just gotten beat up in just some physical games, and it's just kind of been sad to be a Browns fan. Cleveland just can't catch a break.
Yeah, Cleveland cannot catch a break.
Well, and I guess that's what the hope, at least from everyone in Cleveland, is that maybe the sale is the break they were looking for. It really takes a dedicated owner and a smart owner, to really bring a franchise up. You don't want an owner who's going to meddle in every single decision. Yet at the same time, you want someone who's going to, put the investment in, not just in the players, but in the team facilities and all that. So, I think this is the break they're kind of looking for. Haslam, I think, is the owner. He's been a part owner with the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is arguably, one of the greatest franchises in the NFL. So, we'll see. So we'll see if this is the break they're looking for. Hopefully it is. And speaking of breaks, we're going to get back to one more commercial break. This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Fantasy Show, and our guest call-in line is 877-511-1024. So feel free to call in with your questions and comments, and also feel free to chat. So let's take one more commercial break, and then we'll be back with our on-air experts, Evan Ostro and Vince Welks.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com. Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at KickassFantasyFootball.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevo, and our on-air experts, Evan Ostro and Vince Welts. And, fellas, we're going to take this last segment, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the mock drafts. I know we talked a little bit before the show that we've all participated in a few, and I think it's a good time to start talking about some of the trends we've seen and what you've noticed out of the mock drafts that you've had. So, Vince, I don't know if you want to start us off, but let's talk about some of the mock drafts you've done.
Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about the number one pick here. And there's a lot of people that believe your number one pick always has to be a running back. I'm not one of those guys. But for this season, I think it has to be a running back just due to the talent in this year's field. And for my top 5 running backs, I would have to go, and I know I already said earlier on the show I'm a little bit of a homer, have to go number 1, Shady McCoy. Sean cuts like nobody else since Barry Sanders. Number 2, I go Arian Foster in Houston, especially if Matt Schaub still isn't 100% healthy. Coming off that injury, you might want to lean on Foster a little bit more there. Might get him some more carries. Number 3 would have to be Ray Rice, and here I would have Maurice Jones-Drew if he wasn't in the middle of a holdout right now with Jacksonville. Speaking of that holdout, it's a little ridiculous. They got to pay him his money. He's the only thing they got. 4 would be Maurice Jones-Drew, and then my 5th best running back would have to be Chris Johnson. Even though he had a slow year in the beginning of the year last year, I think he's going to bounce back and have a big season this year.
So, top 5 running backs. Now, what have you seen from the drafts? I mean, obviously, Shady McCoy. Hey, any one of the top running backs that you get, you're going to be happy with. But that bucking some of the trends. What have you seen as who's been going as a top player in your drafts?
A lot of Arian Foster. Like Vince said, I think this is definitely a year you got to take a running back. I mean, because you can wait on the quarterback. You can get Matt Ryan, you expect him to throw the ball a ton with Julio Jones coming back. I mean, you can wait on that. Wide receivers besides Calvin, you don't really need to draft a wide receiver that early. There's plenty of studs late. I think some of the guys that and running backs, it's just unbelievable how after like the 3rd or 4th round it's barren. So I mean,
yeah, that's amazing.
You really got to get your horses in the backfield kind of early. I think some guys that I love that have been slipping a lot. I mean, Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, no Cedric, Bernard Scott's not really a red zone threat for them. At wide receiver, I mean, a guy who's going to be Antonio Brown this year, just living off a stud wide receiver 1 is Titus Young. All they do is throw the ball, and those have been my. And another running back that's really slipping. There's no way Rashard Mendenhall comes back this quickly from a Week 17 torn ACL. I think Redmond could be in for a big year. They're playing bad weather. They still want to run the ball. I mean, DeCastro's going to help that line a lot. Those are just some things I've been noticing.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you. I guess you have to plug Isaac Redmond in a little bit higher than you normally would. Mendenhall, even if he is completely healthy, I'm not sure he's necessarily a favorite of the Steeler brass anymore, and I think Redmond will be given every chance to succeed there. I've seen a lot of Arian Foster on top as well, but I actually, my favorite, and when I've had the number one pick, I've actually gone with Ray Rice a lot. I think he's going to be a lot more steady. He's less an injury risk than Arian Foster. The Eagles, they've talked about dialing back McCoy a little bit, and they also have Macklin and Jackson as a receiver, so there's a lot of people that need those touchdowns. So I think actually Ray Rice is a little bit steadier of a pick up top. But I've seen the top three quarterbacks go in the top 10 in just about every draft I've had. Aaron Rodgers has been going as early as even as early as second on some, a lot of around fourth. But you got Rodgers, Brady, and Drew Brees all going in the top 10. So I find that pretty interesting because I agree that there's some really good quarterback values that are going to come in later. Whether it's as you mentioned, Matt Ryan, I think could have a standout year, but even Philip Rivers, who I think he's got, even though he lost his receiver, but he's got got a healthy Antonio Gates back. So I find that all pretty interesting. So let's get a little bit in what surprised you guys the most from one of the mock drafts that you've seen. Well, what's the biggest surprise? So Evan, why don't you go lead us off?
I get my biggest surprise is there's still idiots out there in the world that take kickers without their last pick, which still I have absolutely no clue why people do that. Another thing that shocked me is I've seen a lot of waiting on tight ends besides, your obvious Gronk and Jimmy Graham. I've been, tight ends, people have been kind of waiting on. There is a pretty deep talent there. And I guess the most thing I was shocked, I've been doing a lot of 12 team is, running back is bad this year, like really bad. It's just better to just almost get handcuffs or waiver wire guys the second these guys get hurt because, it gets bad.
Vince, what surprised you so far?
Well, I was surprised with not that it's surprising because the guys are so great, but Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski are going very early in drafts. I'm talking like first. I saw Gronk go in the first round the other day, at the end of the first round, like 10th or 11th pick, and they're usually going second or third rounds. And ever since I've been playing fantasy, I never picked a tight end until I had at least a running back, a wide receiver, and a quarterback. But with the amount of firepower and the amount of yards and touchdowns that Gronk and Graham are putting up, these guys are going early. So that's a surprising thing. And then another thing I wanted to mention is with what we talked about with, this isn't really a surprise, but with Peyton Manning earlier, he's going to fall. So if you are a guy that has a lot of faith in Peyton Manning, you could potentially pick two running backs and a wide receiver before you even get your quarterback and go with Manning. If he does, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but if he does fall that far, and then if he has a Peyton Manning type season, that's a great pick. So that was one thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point.
I think that's a great point, actually. If you can wait for it and pick them up in later rounds, you already got some of the higher end running backs, receivers. I think that's a great point. And it's funny with all the fantasy mock drafts that are out there, and we've all done several on our own. It seems like right now the trends are very similar because I've noticed, I guess with the running back situation, it's not just a trend, it's just a fact. You get a couple of the top 10, 12 running backs and you get a little bit of trouble with depth. But I've noticed the same thing. I've seen Gronk in the first round, which is surprising. But other than Gronk and Jimmy Graham, I've seen the tight ends wait. I've seen that a lot of people waiting a little bit on some of the receivers, trying to get some value in the backgrounds. So it's just been pretty interesting that, we've kind of seen some of the same trends. And, I think the one thing that's actually surprised me pleasantly is, usually you see these people they'll pick a defense in like the fourth or fifth round. Yeah. And, a lot of people waiting on those as well. opposite of the problem you saw with the kicker. They are waiting on the defenses more this year, and it's such a crapshoot on kicker and defense that that it's not worth wasting a higher pick on. So, all right. So, mock draft. I guess final question to you guys would be, do you really see the value in the mock draft, and that does it really help you, before you do your real draft and towards the end of the month? So, Vince, what do you think about the whole idea of the mock draft?
I think it's pretty valuable, but it's just as valuable to go on NFL.com or ESPN.com and look at their top 200 ranked players. That's going to give you a very good idea. If you don't have time to do 5-6 mock drafts, because when you're drafting against people, that gives you a better idea. Obviously, it's not just a set list. But if you don't have time, it's very, you get a lot of information from just looking at those top 200 lists. It gives you a very good idea of where guys are going to go.
I think the main benefit of a mock draft, it's kind of weird. You're in the summer mode, and then all of a sudden you're just thrown on the clock and you got to make some pretty important decisions pretty quick. It can get hectic. It's just nice to familiarize with it. I think, just get a little comfortable. And I think the only thing with that top 200, just looking at that, is, that's a helpful list, but I also think the mock drafts help in the fact that you get a general perception, almost like a poll or a survey of seeing what players people like, what players people don't like, what players people are forgetting. I think that's its main benefit. Like a perfect benefit of that is I think people are really forgetting that Malcolm Floyd, Vincent Jackson's gone. I mean, he's going to step in and be the one in a top-notch passing offense, and I think that's just an example of seeing how mock drafts can help.
I actually like it. I like the mock drafts. I think it just helps you get a feel for, kind of what people are thinking, because we all have our own valuations and we all have our own strategies, but then you get to see, for real what other people are going to do when their turn comes on the clock. Just to remind our listeners, we also, on our KickassFantasyFootball.com website, we do have our own ADP average draft position. We have our chart. We have a draft analyzer. You can analyze your team after the draft. So, we're really loading up on our website. We're doing a great job. We've, getting some new partners in, and it's just well worth the $9.95. So, but, as far as mock drafts go, go out, have fun with it. I think it's a great way to kind of get in the mode. I started doing my mock drafts just to get ready for the football season and to get ready for the radio show. So it's definitely all a good thing. So, got a couple minutes left in the show, and so I thank you for Evan and Vince for coming on. This is their first performance on Kick-Ass Fantasy Football radio show. And just any parting thoughts from you guys? How's it been? How's the experience been? Evan?
Parting shots, I love this. This is a lot of fun. Can't wait till next Thursday. And I guess another thing I'll leave on, just two players people are forgetting about. Lance Moore, one less receiver in New Orleans. And people are forgetting Reggie Wayne, still the one there. They're going to be down a lot, and they got a good quarterback this year. I'll leave on that.
All right.
Yeah. Excited to be on. Excited for a kick-ass season, if you will. Every Thursday I'll be on till the end of the season, and I'm excited about it. Enjoyed doing the show. Enjoyed everything we talked about. And yeah, watch out for them Eagles. That's all I gotta say.
All right. So again, this has been the KickassFantasyFootball.com radio show. We have our website, www.KickassFantasyFootball.com. Our shows throughout the week, we have 3 nightly shows on Tuesday nights at 9, Wednesday nights at 9, and Thursdays at 7. And then we have our Sunday morning show on ESPN. It's 97.3 for all you in the local Philadelphia and South Jersey area. And that's on at 8 o'clock in the morning. So, hey, guys, it's been a great experience talking with you. And, I look forward to hosting with you guys again in the future. And let's keep it up. Let's have a great year. And I'm also looking forward to our draft that's coming up in a couple of weeks, because it'll be a lot of fun to compare the talent that we have. So thank you very much for our listeners, and hope you listen in next week.